Hi there, class. Today I wanted to talk about space planning in SketchUp. And there's a couple of steps to this, and so I thought I'd give you a little outline of what I'm going to talk about, starting with setting up the existing conditions. And then there's a couple of things you can do, including hiding things or using layers or locking different elements to help you go along. And then using scenes to help you as you try to evaluate the designs that you're creating. And of course, finding components is the most fun going online and looking for great things to fill up your model. But sometimes those components need to be modified, so I'll go over how to do that. And then once you've got them the way you like them, you can make copies or even array those components to kind of plan out your space. And finally, creating some handy views with different design options is really nice when you're presenting to a client or trying to work through different approaches to a design. So let's take a look at a SketchUp model. And here is a wonderful model of the existing conditions of the project we're going to be doing, which is a cafe. And first of all, you can see it's kind of a box, so very exciting. And what I like to do when I start out existing conditions, first of all, when you're working in an office, usually you get one person to create the existing conditions model. That way they're the most familiar with it and all the mathematics and everything that goes into creating a model of an existing space. So I would strongly recommend when you work on a studio project that you absolutely should have one person set up the model and set it up correctly. And work together with that person so that you get a model that's exactly right. Anyway, once you've done that, the existing conditions, there's a couple things you can do to make your life easier. First of all, SketchUp has layers that you can use to control visibility. Now, they're not as aggressive as AutoCAD layers where you can actually control line weights and other things, but we can turn them on and off. If you're on a PC, you probably already have a system tray with these elements in it. They may be minimized, so just click on the top bar to maximize them. On a Mac, to get the Layers menu, you'll have to go to the Window pull-down menu and choose Layers. To get the Entity Info menu, you can do the same, or you can just right-click on an object that you've selected and choose Entity Info. Anyway, when you select an object, I'm just clicking on the top face here, it will tell you what layer it's on. You can choose any layer that is existing in your model. I'll choose Existing Conditions. And, it doesn't look any different. Again, AutoCAD tends to change the way objects look, AutoCAD layers. SketchUp ones don't. Now, I want to put this whole existing conditions on that same layer. I could, kind of pick pieces and hold down Shift and add them all together. But you may remember you can also double-click on objects to select the face and its surrounding edges. If you triple-click on an object, it actually selects the face, the surrounding edges, and all adjacent faces. But I'm not getting these windows, so I could use either a selection window. Remember, that's a window where everything that falls within it is selected. Or a crossing window, again, depending on where you are in the model. Sometimes that's better. That selects anything that touches it. But my favorite is to do Command A or Control A on a PC. What that does, that stands for all. Select all. And now I've got everything in the model. And there's nothing else in this model that I know of anyway. So I can come here and choose Existing Conditions. Okay, and this is super handy. And I can even turn off that layer if I wanted. Which is great sometimes when you're just struggling to find an object that you've lost, for example. And I can even add new layers. So for example, if I click the plus sign, I can make a layer for option 1 for my design option. I can even make that layer current, and I can make other layers. So for example, if I know I need 3 options total, I can make additional layers. Again, I'm just in the layers menu. This little plus sign does just what you think it would do. It would add a layer, and I can even turn those other layers off. So it's really handy. As I go, I can add options and not have to worry about seeing them right away until I get to a scene where those options are visible. So anyway, here I am, I've got my model, and I want to get inside the model. Now, I could use the zoom tool and try and smash through the wall, and that works. And in fact, if you use the zoom tool, you can eventually smash through the wall. But I want to show you another way, which is a little handy, more handy, when you are doing a space planning project, because you usually want to go and have kind of an overview of your project. I'm just going to close these. What I like to do is go and hide the top of my model so that I can see into it, and then save a scene where those that overview is apparent. So what I'll do, to hide an object, you can just select the face that you want to hide, right-click on it, and yes, you got it, choose Hide. Now in this particular model, there's actually a thickness to the walls, the floor, and the ceiling. So I'm going to want to hide the inside face of the ceiling. And you see how now I can see my model pretty clearly. And this will make it very handy for space planning. So I want to be able to save this view where the ceilings are hidden. And to do that, just go to View, Animation, Add Scene. You see how it pops up here. And I can even rename this guy for Overview, something like that. Super handy. Now, it's also handy because, of course, now I can see inside the model, which means I can use some of my view tools to help me orient. I'm going to click the Position Camera tool. Now, if you remember correctly, this is sort of like the station point in a one-point perspective. So you want to think about what do you want to look at, and then put your station point opposite it in the room. So I'm going to click the back of the room so that I get a view forward. And when you click the Position Camera tool, once it's placed you in the model, it uses the Look Around tool, which is that creepy little eye, to help you modify your view of the model. It's essentially like the camera is on a tripod and you're just spinning it around. Now I can change my eye height. You know, your typical American male, I think the average height is 5'8" or 5'10". So their eyes are probably down at 5'7". You can just type in a different number. But what I find with architectural views is often they look better when they're a little lower. 4 feet is good. And again, you can use Look Around to help you compose the view. Now, as with a lot of interiors, they tend to need a wider field of view in order to see inside the model. And to get that wider field of view, just click the zoom tool. We could zoom in and out, but we can also change the field of view, which is down here on the lower right. You don't even have to click in there. Just type in a different number, 55 degrees, for example. And now we have a much nicer view of our project. Okay. Now, a few things, though, as we go forward. First of all, wouldn't it be nice to see the ceiling as you're working on this model? Well, of course it would. So we can unhide those elements that were the ceiling planes. You can just do that using the Edit menu and choose Unhide All. And you should see those in there. What's nice about this, if I add a scene in here, and I'll just right-click on the existing scene and choose Add, each of these scenes will remember what your settings were. It will remember that objects were hidden. When I come back here, the ceiling is in place. So for example, if you find your furniture is off, you can quickly return to the overview. Also, once you're inside and once you've set up this field of view, you might also want to think about what sort of perspective drawing this is. Right now you can see it's kind of a 3-point. The vertical lines are going to a vanishing point somewhere above my screen. You can actually get rid of that. You can make it look more like a traditional perspective drawing. If you just choose Camera and then 2-point perspective, what you'll see is that forces the vertical lines to be parallel with each other, which is kind of a more traditional look. And again, you can compose this view using any of the tools that are available. Just be aware if you use the Orbit tool that you will get rid of that 2-point perspective. So I've changed this scene. If I wanted to remember the changes, I can just right-click on it and choose Update. Now, if you find you're doing this a lot, you might want to call up the Scene Manager. Just right-click on one of your scenes and choose Scene Manager. And this manager lists all of the scenes in your project. It gives a little icon of them, but it gives you the opportunity to change their names. So for example, view to front might be a good descriptive name of this view. And if I wanted to create a view towards the back, I could, once again, I'll pick, in this case, a corner for my station point, use my look around tool to look in the back of the space, and perhaps I will go with that 2-point perspective look because I like it so much. And now I can add a scene using my scene manager and call it view to back. Now if you look at these, each of these scenes does actually remember whatever visible layers are on or off, and also the hidden geometry and other things. Other graphical settings, you can change what it will remember. But this is a great start. I'm going to close my scene manager. Now I can quickly jump to different parts of my model, or this nice overview, which is handy. Now you might say, what next? Well, what next is we want to put stuff in our model. That's really the fun part of SketchUp. Or one of many fun parts, I should say. And I think we've talked a little bit about using the 3D warehouse to search for models. And also, I have mentioned using form fonts, which we have an account for on our desktops. You can find models, and I just searched for cafe furniture in form fonts. And you can download these models onto your desktop in room 206. And then you can copy these into your model, or you can just open your SketchUp model in those on those computers. And once they're in your model, you can take them and work on them on your laptop again. So I would strongly recommend using something like form fonts because well, first of all, because we're paying for it, we got to get our money's worth. But also because the models are generally very high quality and are quite easy to work with. Now, I have a bunch of models here that I've collected. Let me see if I can paste them into my project. Might take a minute for it to come through. Oh, there they are. I'll just place them over there. And most of these are loaded in from form fonts or from other places. And first of all, when you have a component that you've loaded in, some of these are from the 3D warehouse, and some of them I don't know where I got them. What you will discover is that sometimes things like a counter length is not what you want. Okay, it's too short or too long. There's a couple things you can do. If it's just a counter, for example, that is too short, like this one, all you have to do is edit this component, and you should be able to stretch it by just moving the edge of the countertop. I'm just going to double click on the counter to edit it. And you see how this edge here, that actually, because everything is so sketchy so sticky in SketchUp, I can select that edge and just move it, and you see how it extends the counter, or I can shrink it also. Just make sure that as you do this, you use your axes. See how it's going in the red direction? To force one axis or another, you can, by all means, use the arrow keys to force it in that red direction. And that will make it go, in something rectilinear like this, it will make it so it won't get all messed up. Now, some of you have also tried to scale models, and that can work, but you have to be a little careful. One way to do it is using the scale tool. And when you do that, you get these green grips, which allow you to scale it. And of course, if I grab this middle one, it will do something very similar to what I was doing before, but you see how it's also changed the proportion of those stools. Not really so nice. Another thing you can do, sometimes components come in that are too big, or too small. You can use a tape measure to measure one side. I'm just going to measure the back of this. And you see how it says 3 feet. Well, what if it's supposed to really be 4 feet in height? I can actually type in 4 feet, and it will resize it. Now, one thing to worry about, if I do that, it will actually resize the entire model. Now, this is great if you've imported a model of existing conditions from, say, AutoCAD, and sometimes the scale gets off. this is a great way to resize that entire model. Do that first. Now, I don't want to resize the model. I just want to resize this component. So the way to do that is to double-click inside the component so that you're just editing the component itself. And then use the tape measure tool. And I'll just measure one side. And if I type in 4 feet, it will resize only the active group or the component. Now, of course, I actually think that's too big, so I'm going to make that go down to its correct size again. Anyway, so those are some tools for manipulating components. And of course, if you have a component that's made up of several pieces, you can, by all means, double-click on the component to edit it. And if you don't want these stools, for example, you can just use the system delete command, Control or Command X, to delete them. Close the component, and now they're gone. What's nice is they're actually still on your clipboard. You can paste those into your model. And that's a super quick way to make copies of individual elements. I'm going to copy this chair by Command-C and then Command-V to paste. When you paste in like this, the select command is active. So that means you can do things like rotate it or move it. Now, when you move an object in SketchUp, I always recommend grabbing that object either by some endpoint at the very bottom of the component, or better yet, just click on the ground. And that avoids having models that want to zip down in 3 dimensions and end up being, underneath other objects. Remember, everything is in 3D, so that smart cursor is going to select things that are in 3D. Now, so moving is great. And let's say I want to create some seating for my project. I'm going to make a copy of this chair, Command-C, and then paste it in. You see how it's glued to my cursor. I'm going to pan over here, orbit my model a little bit. Now, what if I want a row of chairs? Well, I can use the move command, and I just typed in M to activate it. And when you have the move command, if you tap one of the modifiers, on a PC it's Control, on a Mac it's Alt. See how I get a little plus sign next to my cursor? I can now make a copy of that component. And again, it's going to want to reference your red direction or your green direction. So make sure that you snap to those, or you use your arrow keys to force it to go in that direction. I can type in a distance for that copy after I click to place it. I can type in 2 feet, for example. Oh, I don't like that. 3 feet is better. No, 2 feet is better. See how you can change your mind. But you can also type in other modifiers. If I type in the letter X, and again, look down here to see what I'm typing, X and then some number, say 4, and hit Enter, it will make 4 copies of that original object. I can still change my mind, X3, and Enter, and see how it changes the number, X4 comes back. I can even still change the distance between these objects, and then change the number if I want. That's too many. There we go. Perfect. So you see how I can make, this is called an array. What's nice is that once you've created the array in one direction, I can use a selection window, make my copy, hit Move, tap Alt, and I can make an array in the other direction, 3 feet maybe per aisle, and then times 4, and I can get seating for my project pretty quickly. Okay? So that is a really quick way to generate a simple array of a project. Now, what if, and I think I'm going to save this view here as my option 1. So I'm going to add the scene, and I'll rename it option 1. Now, what if I want to do an option where the seating is in an arc? Well, there's another tool that we can use, and but first I want to save that as a different option. So I'm going to call up my Layers dialog box again. I'm going to turn off option 1. Oop, I got to make option 2 my current layer. Turn off option 1. And now, when I come in here, oh, except my chairs are all gone. Gotta go get my chairs out of my components. Window, components. And here, we'll use... actually, let's use these. These are nice. All right, there we go. I'll use those, and I want to make an arc of these components. I'm going to move it into place. Now, the way that you do this is you use the rotate command. I'm just going to pan over a little bit to give myself some space. When you use the rotate command, obviously I've selected the object. The rotate command, normally you'll click some base point, you click a line that is your reference line, and then you can rotate your model, your component, or whatever you've selected around. Now, the rotate command, though, works the same as the move command, whereas if you tap the Alt button, or on a PC, Control, see how there's a little plus sign next to my rotator icon? Now when I click once to make a copy, you see how it makes a second one that is rotated around from the first one. And I can type in X and 3, for example, to get several copies. One trick, though, sometimes when you're using a rotated array, I'm going to put this in the back here a little bit, it's a little more tricky to get the axis, the center point of the rotation just right. Sometimes orbiting your model a little bit helps. And sometimes you know where you want it to start, you know where you want it to end, but you don't really know how many copies you want. To do that, to figure out how many you need, click your base point, your reference line, but then go to where you want the array to finish. See how I clicked at the end of my array? Now I can use the modifier. And again, if you watch down here, I'll type in slash and then 3. Oops. 28 degrees, I guess, was my original. Slash and then 3. And what that will do is it will squeeze several copies in between the initial one. Now, I think I can get one more in there. Let's see. Slash 4. Oh, yeah. Very nice. And again, like before, I can select these objects and make several rows. And of course, might need a little more spacing with these guys because they're such big chairs. So this is a great way to quickly make a circular array. Anyway, I'm going to add in another scene, and I'll rename this one Option 2. And just like that, I can quickly jump from one scene to another. Now, I have another project kind of already cooked here that has several options in it, and it has a bunch of other saved scenes. And you can see that once the models get fairly complicated, it's nice to be able to switch between these options when you're presenting it. So that is how you set up a model for space planning in SketchUp.